Well, today's date is December 1, 2017. Yesterday was my 90th birthday, November 30, so I'm delighted everybody's here. The idea of this event today really came about as over the last year or so, communicating back and forth with Rachel, who's not here this morning.
She left.
I realized how little really the three of us knew about our grandparents and really even about the early years of our parents. So I thought this would be an opportunity for our children and grandchildren, if they so desire, to sort of ask us the kind of questions we might have wanted to ask our parents and grandparents had they lived long enough and we knew enough to even ask them. So that's why we arranged this and we knew that everybody couldn't talk at the same time, so I suggested that Jennifer and AJ coordinate the questions and let them be the facilitators. So I'll turn it over to whoever's going to talk first.
Everybody gets to answer the same question, so don't be nervous. Let's start with an easy question. What distinct childhood memory of your parents or your grandparents, pick one, you don't have to answer all four. Just tell us something that you remember that distinctly identified your father, mother, grandparent.
I'm Natalie Robinson.
Thanks for clarifying.
Well, I thought of better. My mother's mother, this picture is her wedding picture. So you can hold it up.
Wedding picture. Okay.
So her mother lived in Knoxville, and I hated to go there because soot would fall on your shoulders. You walked out the door, you turned black on your shoulders. So I didn't have very pleasant memories of Knoxville.
Well, that was because they had coal-burning furnaces.
Yeah.
And that's why there was so much coal ash
Coal.
all over the place.
So we used to go to, she had a little grocery store in front of the house. And what I remember about that house, it had from the kitchen there was a little passageway, and my job was to sleep on a huge box that was in the hall.
And how old were you at this?
I had to be little. I guess we came from Bristol. We came from Bristol, and we lived in Bristol the first 6 years of my life.
So of your grandmother, did she make you stay on this box, or she?
No, there just wasn't any other place to sleep. You slept wherever you could find a place, and I don't know. He was a year younger. Nobody questioned that? No?
Okay. All right, Gilbert, how about you?
One of the very first funny things that ever happened was I was about 4 years old. And they always said that I was car crazy from the time I was born, and we always knew about cars. So we were living on Pasadena, and my dad somehow, right before the war started, comes home with a brand new, beautiful black Oldsmobile that had hydromatic. In those days, they didn't call it automatic; it was hydromatic. So when you got out of it at night, you put it in reverse, put the brake on. There was no park. So the next morning, Mommy Ella had been driving these people around since she was 17 years old. They have big cars, big wheels and everything. So for some reason, I've asked these two and they don't know either, but my dad called her Mud all the time, Mud.
Yeah, he did.
It was Mud. Anyway, he takes her outside and he's, Mud, here's the car, and it's automatic shift now, and there's no clutch, and you're going to really enjoy driving it, and let me show you, get in and start it, and let me show you. So Mommy Ella gets in, starts it, and there's no clutch. When she puts it in gear, she drove through the garage doors.
And then from that time, when we moved to Knoxville, she hit the same tree going in and out of the
Our
driveway.
I remember that tree. A lot of people hit that tree.
What I remember about my parents is that I don't ever recall them raising their voice to each other or to any of the three of us. And it seemed to me, you know, whatever they suggested or asked that we do, we did. I have not been able to carry on that condition, that situation of not raising my voice. Although as I've gotten older, as my children say, I've mellowed. I don't raise it as often as I used to. Anyhow, that's what I remember of the two of them. Although my father did raise his voice to me one time when I was 28, and I was telling him how I thought he was not managing his business correctly. And he didn't say anything, and so I kept telling him over and over again, and finally he said, "Oh, shut up." I was so shocked. I did shut up.
Jarvin, I wonder, just for the record, if you would tell that story about the cab ride in Macon. I don't know. Just for the tape, I think it's important this group hear this story.
We moved to Macon in 1932. When in 1932, I don't remember. But my father and Morris, his brother, had a chain of shoe stores that went bankrupt during the Depression, and he got a job in Macon. And we lived in a so-called high-rise apartment in Macon, Georgia. It's hard to believe, but it was about a 9 or 10-story apartment building. And both my parents worked in the store where my father had a job. It was called the Darling Shop. And one day they had arranged for me to go over to a neighbor, the Kaplan's house. Their children were older than me, but maybe they had a maid that was going to look out for all of us. I don't know where Natalie was at the time, but
And you were 4 years old.
I may have been 5 by then. Anyhow, they arranged for a taxi to come pick me up and take me over to a friend's house, and they left me 10 cents for the cab drive. And so our maid sent me outside when the cab driver showed up with my 10 cents, and he took me over to the friend's house, and he told me the charge was 15 cents, and I only had 10 cents. And he insisted I pay him 15 cents, and I said, "Well, take me home." And he said, "That'll be another 15 cents. And so I started crying naturally. And fortunately, somebody came out from the house and came up with another nickel and paid the taxi driver.
I think the starkness of a 5-year-old being put into a taxi by themselves with 10 cents, only 10 cents, we would do that today, wouldn't we? Jennifer, your turn.
All right. I was wondering what life was like in the house with the three of you when you were teenagers. What is a memory you might have from that time?
He's 11 years younger than me,
Okay.
so it was insignificant.
So you just paid no attention to him?
But Charlotte said last night that he was very much a part of things. I don't know why. Why? But anyway, because he was so much younger than my friends and everybody else that was part of our life, he was pretty insignificant. Cars. Lots of cars.
That's true.
So, let's see, I
Well,
don't know what...
Gilbert, what do you remember about being?
Well, by the time I got cognizant of what was going on by 6 or 7, they were both out of the house. So I almost had a kind of different life at the time. Mama Ella was around all the time. And My dad could disappear better than anybody. He could find something to do and be gone, particularly if he knew mother's relatives were coming to visit us. He'd be. But we moved from Pasadena, which was a house they were renting, to Homestead, which was a great house. And one of the things that my mother did was she decided that Natalie ought to have the master bedroom because it had a bath. And my father never got over that. He was they were in the front, big bedroom, but he had to walk out in the hall to go to the bathroom. So she took priority, and then she went to college, and that was in. They never moved back there. But Jarvin and I shared a room, and I was telling him on the way down here, one of my memories was when he would hang in the closet upside down.
Well, even then, I had a problem with my neck. And the doctor that I was sent to told me that I needed to stretch the space between my vertebrae. And so I didn't really hang in the closet upside down, but I did have to use some sort of contraption where it looked like I might be hanging to try to stretch it. That's I will say, and maybe Kerry or even Danny might fit into this thing. I was the middle child, so I always thought that my parents really favored Natalie. And of course, when Gilbert was born, I decided they really favored Gilbert. I think we both decided they favored Gilbert at that time. But that was somewhat interesting.
But you were talking about riding in a cab. By the time we lived in Homestead, I was already 6 or 7. And my dad said, you can ride the bus down on Saturday morning and come run the vacuum cleaners at the store. So that was my early. But I actually walked to Johnson Road and got on a trolley. It wasn't a bus, it was a trolley, and rode downtown. You know, in those days, you didn't think about things like that.
So what was your fondest memory of family life growing up? I mean, what was it about? Y'all moved around a lot, but was there something that you could point to that you remember was the fondest thing? You mentioned your parents never yelled at you.
Well, I guess my best memories were the period of time we lived in Atlanta as a family from 1933 until 1950. And routinely we would have Sunday lunch together, which was always fried chicken. And,
Lemon pie.
And lemon pie.
Who made the fried chicken?
Well, we had a maid that came in on Sunday morning and worked a half a day. And those are the two things that she was very good at. Also, she was great at making a barbecued leg of lamb, which was very good. And she, we would have Thanksgiving, and I do remember, and this was before Gilbert was born, when I was probably 6 or 7, going with my mother over to Washington Avenue to a little tiny fresh fish market to buy fish to make gefilte fish for holidays.
So who made the gefilte fish?
My mother did. Later on, she
Can you
told me.
believe that?
That I find hard to believe, but yeah. Sure.
Yeah, she was
How
good
about
at
you, Mom? What was your fondest memory?
It wasn't, it was later. But we already lived in the house that we gave up to go out to the lake. But I think
You jumped 50 years. You jumped 50 years.
First place, Daddy would pick us all up, and we'd go look at the ducks in Fountain City. And somebody would have to tell us that we were going to look at the ducks, I guess. So, but then we didn't think anything about it, but We used to go to their house to eat bacon.
That
Right?
part I
To eat
remember.
bacon?
Yeah, they kept a kosher house.
And
Mitchell liked bacon, so they'd go over to my parents' house.
we sent the kids over. We didn't know it was a surprise. I mean, that it was unusual. So
That's a fondest memory.
that was because my father liked bacon. he
Yeah. How about you, Gilbert?
On Sundays when we lived in Atlanta, during the war, is it Fort McPherson was here or Gordon?
Yeah, Fort McPherson.
We always had some of the Jewish boys that were stationed there to the house on Sunday because they had a big meal, and they were still kind of in and out, but usually on Sundays we had a big meal and had a lot of those guys in quite a bit.
Wow.
Soldiers.
Soldiers. Eating the fried chicken and lemon pie.
Right.
Actually,
Iced tea?
looking for
What'd you drink? Iced tea?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola?
Coca-Cola.
Sweet iced tea.
Sweet iced tea.
But that lady's name was Jessie, as the second Jessie.
Yeah.
And she not only worked a half a day on Sunday, she was there from 7 o'clock in the morning until we ate dinner at night, 6 days a week.
Oh, really?
For about $15 a week.
$15 a week?
Yes.
All right,
You
next
could run
question.
two businesses.
I
on that.
know. I was wondering if any of the three of you ever experienced anti-Semitism growing up.
I just remember one time in a car. I don't know whose car it was, but I think at O'Keefe. I went to O'Keefe very proudly. Everybody else I knew went to Bass, but I went to O'Keefe. Don't ask me why. But anyway, somebody made some kind of remark. I don't know what it was. I don't have any idea. But it was, I remember thinking that was not the right thing to do, not right atmosphere. So I got out. I got out. I don't know where I was or anything.
Do you know how old you were?
Well, O'Keefe.
That was a junior high school.
It was, where was it?
Over near Georgia Tech.
Yeah,
Okay.
the building's still there, I think.
Yes, it is. I don't remember any direct or any overt anti-Semitism, but there was, growing up, there was a real distinction socially, and whether a lot of it was self-imposed by the Jewish families or by the non-Jewish families. But as integrated as the white society was in Atlanta, it was only during business hours. It was never socially integrated at night or weekends.
The Mayfair Club played a big part in our life in the summertime, and I don't remember the winter, but summertime.
The social clubs in Atlanta were Jewish, non-Jewish, black, white, whatever. And the Mayfair Club was one of the three clubs that were basically Jewish membership when we were teenagers.
I don't know how we got over there.
On a bus,
Taxi.
On a bus?
bus or streetcar.
Wow. I don't remember that.
I had transportation. Mother drove me.
Tell me about going to visit Aunt Sarah.
Oh.
Was that an anti-Semitism incident?
Yes.
You want to answer the anti-Semitism
Well, I'll go
first?
to I'll answer that one. The only thing I ever remember was a Sunday, and as you all know, my father would go to the store on Sunday just like any other day. So after lunch, he and I and Mother went to the Darling Shop, was on Peachtree right across from what used to be Davison's department store. Now his offices were there. There was another store farther down on Whitehall. And we got there, and there was a cross painted on the door, and there was some kind of literature, you know, you Jews need to move on. I don't know. Well, the week later, the Klan announced that they were going to burn a cross on the top of Stone Mountain. And my father said, we ought to ride out there and look at it. And well, I was petrified. I wasn't going anywhere. He was game for a lot of things.
He wasn't afraid, huh?
No. But that was really the only incident. I mean, believe it or not, I went to Morningside, and our class, there were more Jewish kids in the class than non-Jewish kids. By the time we got to the 7th grade, it was almost like going to Hebrew school.
Okay.
Well, I got one more thing to add to that.
Sure.
There was a girl in my class named Virginia Green, and she was one of my best friends because she lived near us. And it turned out that her father was head of the Klan.
He was a Grand Dragon.
Really?
Dr. Hiram Green, and his son Joe was one of my best friends through school too. Used to go over and play at his house, and people would wonder, why are you going over there? I didn't know the difference.
I didn't
His father never did anything when we were around that would indicate that.
Well, the only thing they did was burn a cross on Stone Mountain.
Okay, two-part question. What perhaps has been your most happiest time in life, and what maybe if you had a sad time in life?
Well, the happiest time right now for me is right now.
Right now. Did you hear that? That's good.
Yesterday and today.
Fantastic. We'll go happy first, and then we'll go
Yeah.
sad. Mom, you got a happy time?
Kind of think. It wasn't I would have thought the university, but I don't remember being elated about something.
How about when we fixed the wall after the car, you left the car and rolled off the...
That was
That was a happy time.
That was a very happy time. Michael, were you there?
Yes. All right, we'll come back to you, Mom.
Okay.
Gilbert, you got a happy time?
Living here at that time, Atlanta wasn't near anything like it is today. And you know, my friend Marshall Bloom, who you all have known, you know, we just kind of had a great life riding back and forth. We lived back to back for about 3 or 4 years, and then we moved to Homestead. And we just had a great time, you know. Growing up, it was a good time in Atlanta.
Okay. Anybody want to share a sad time? Or a tough time?
Sad time would be the day Fran and I got married. Happy time would be the day we didn't get
That was good. He didn't have to think about that very long, did he? How about a difficult time growing up, or a difficult observation of your parents or grandparents?
In Macon, we were only there about a year, I think, and I broke my arm skating, and then they told me I had to stay 3 weeks in a cast and stay in a dark room.
Dark room?
That was pretty bad.
I think she's gotten that mixed up a little bit.
Huh?
Because at that time I had the measles, and measles I was confined to a dark room. So I don't think she was in a dark room because of her broken arm.
With a broken arm?
I think we shared the same bedroom, and that's why she was in a dark room.
I thought it was me. I don't remember you at all.
Did you share a difficult time, or was that? Do you have anything else?
Difficult time. Yeah, probably the saddest times were when my parents each passed away. Yeah.
This question is brought to you from Carrie Levison. What were your parents' political views, and what would they think today of Donald Trump's presidency?
Well, we did not discuss politics. At least I didn't hear my parents discussing politics. In the 30s, we listened. The only politics I remember being aware of inside our family and our home was that we would listen to Franklin D. Roosevelt's fireside chats. They were not daily news briefings. There were no television. And so periodically, it might be months, he would have a radio speaking where he would be in the Oval Office or somewhere in the White House. And there would be cameras that show it in newsreels. But he would, whatever policy position he wanted to make a pitch for, that was his fireside chats. I assume my parents voted for Roosevelt the 4 times he ran because he was the president that was leading the U.S. supposedly out of the Depression. But they never talked about it, so I don't really know whether they did or they didn't. I tend to think that when I told my mother that I voted for Tom Dewey instead of Harry Truman, she was shocked. So if that persisted to be her political views, I do not think she would approve of Donald Trump. First of all, from the standpoint of the way he talks, she would decidedly disapprove of it. But she would have disapproved of Bill Clinton too.
Well, the only thing I remember was that I voted Democratic forever, except when Tom Dewey ran, and you convinced me that I should vote Republican.
Did you go back?
I was
after
working
that?
at J.P. Allen, which was, the store at the time.
1948,
And I thought I should vote Republican because everybody in the place was voting Republican. So
Harry Truman had not gained the reputation and standing that he has today. He had succeeded Roosevelt as president when Roosevelt died very suddenly. As the VP, if I recall the history, he had only met with Roosevelt one time while he was vice president. He knew nothing of the development of the atomic bomb, so that when he became president and he was told about it, he was, to say the least, a bit shocked. And also, practically all of his first appointments for 2 or 3 years were his cronies. And he first got elected to the Senate through the support of the Pendergrass machine in Missouri. So none of that did I like. So.
Nat, did you go back to being a Democrat after that? Did you go back to the Democratic side after that?
Yeah, one time.
I think you voted for Shirley Chisholm, did you not?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Y'all remember Shirley? You're too young. Yeah. All right, Gilbert.
Jarvin's right. I don't really remember having any political discussions in those days, instead of like the network news, we had radios that had 3 or 4 announcers. Edward R. Murrow was one, and a guy named Kaltenborn, and my father always listened to those guys. I don't know, but they they both liked Roosevelt. And when he died, of course, that was a very sad time. The only time I can remember anything, Georgia had a governor by the name of Eugene Talmadge, who in his day was probably a big anti-Semite and a lunatic and probably a crook. I think he was running for re-election, and they both said, we just won't go vote. That's the only real reason, real memory I ever had. But he was, well, the Talmadge family has still a legacy in Georgia. So.
All right, Mom, you mentioned your job at J.P. Allen. I wonder if each of you could just, you had parents that both worked on and off their whole careers, worked hard. I wonder if you could just describe what your best job was in your career. Or a time in your life when what you were doing was the most rewarding. How's that?
The reason I had the job was that the woman who taught at the school I went to in New York was good friends with somebody that worked at Allen's. And she convinced him that he should hire me because they didn't have anybody else coming from Atlanta. So.
And what did you do there?
Goofed off.
Were you a salesperson? Were you a stock?
No, I was assistant to the manager of the accessories department, the cosmetics, the handbags, jewelry, stockings, all the kind of things that were on the first floor.
On the first floor, wow.
First floor. So I usually would end up being marketing, putting prices on something. And I would go down in the basement and disappear. Disappear.
And this was the best job you had?
3 years I had that job.
What did you do in the basement?
Boxes would come in and I'd be marketing, and I was, let's see, what did I do? I don't know. Made little tags to go on the jewelry and go on the pocketbooks and go on whatever else, that was on the first floor.
Did you get a discount if you bought something there?
I don't remember. Even with the discount, I couldn't have afforded anything.
Arvin, how about you?
Well, I had a variety of jobs. It seemed like I can remember my father got me a job in Friedman's shoe department in the Kessler department store on Lower Wino Street. And at that time, I had an allowance of $2 a week. I was 12. And he got me this job, and it paid me $2 a day. So he decided I didn't need the allowance anymore. And I told him, that's what I thought of social welfare probably was pretty good. Why do I need to work if you're going to give me $2? He said, because I'm not giving you $2 anymore. Anyhow, I had after school jobs through high school. But I will say the funniest experience and an eye-opener was when I finished law school. My mother called me and told me that her mother, which we called Bubby, or Bubby Copeland, who lived in Knoxville, and that's back in that same house behind the grocery store, except she didn't operate the grocery store. This was 1951.
Oh.
So I drove to Knoxville, and I went to see Bubby, and she told me that since I finished law school, she would like to, would I draw a will for her? And I told her I would. She said, well, I really not sure I'd want a member of the family to do it, but I went back to the attorney that drew my last will, and he wanted to double the price on me, so I'm not going to pay that. So that's why I asked your mother for you to come up to talk to me. So she handed me, this was 1951, she handed me her last will, which was drawn in 1927. And I said, well, what will you charge for this will? And she said $7.50, and he wants $50, and I'm not paying it. So I drove from Knoxville up there for this interview. And she wanted to make sure, though, that I agreed that we had an attorney-client relationship and I could not discuss anything with anybody in the family about what she wanted to do. And I gave her that assurance, and she said, well, I'm going to give you something, it's compensation that's worth more than the $15. And she gave me what she said was a bottle of bourbon that was left over from my parents' wedding.
To pay for it?
Pay for it. So I thanked her, and then she told me what she wanted to do was divide everything equally among her 4 children. And I thought, well, you know, what's so strange about that? But I didn't ask her. Plus the fact that she wanted my father to be the executor rather than her son, who had, by that time had moved from Knoxville to Florida. So I thought that was reasonable. So I did. And later on, I think I figured out why she didn't want me to tell anybody. Because before my parents moved back to Knoxville in 1950, her son and his wife had lived in Knoxville basically all their adult lives and had sort of looked after her and taken care of her. And that his wife thought that she should get something more. He should get something more for having taken care of his mother all those years. But that was pure guesswork on mine. That was my interesting first job as an attorney.
Well, going back to that bottle of liquor or whatever you get, still in the attic on Cherokee Boulevard, there's a bottle of Bubby's homemade wine that has been there since MLR. My father picked her up and took her off of university. And the wine came with her, but the wine's still upstairs in the balcony. Probably big jug.
Probably tastes like vinegar.
But my job after I graduated from vacuum cleaning was running layaways, which was an exciting job, except every store we ever had was on the 3rd floor where the layaways were. So you had to run up, put them on a hanger, put them in a chute, and send them back down to the ground floor. So
Put them in a what?
a chute, you know, it had a
Oh.
pulley.
Okay, I thought you said shoot.
Maybe you should explain layaway for this crowd. Some may not know what a layaway is.
Oh, well, you know, in those days, layaways, most stores didn't have charge accounts. This kind of stores like the Darling store. So people could come in, and if a dress was $7, they could put 50 cents down, and they pay for it by the week. And when they come get it, during Christmas, layaway, I can't tell you how many times I had to go up and down those steps during Christmas, but it was an unbelievable time.